Zuri Mwale was only 31, but her life already looked like something out of a dream, at least from the outside. Living in Lusaka, Zambia, she was known as the calm, supportive wife, the kind who always stood quietly behind her husband, Temba. While others saw a perfect couple, only Zuri knew how many sacrifices she had made to build that illusion. When Temba lost his job years ago, she was the one who picked him up. She believed in him when no one else did. She stayed up late helping him polish his business proposals, even skipped her own meals to make sure he had gas money for interviews. And when he said he wanted to start working at Maquina Motors, she didn't hesitate. She emptied her savings account, the one she had been growing since university, just to help him get started. People used to tell her, "Zuri, you're such a lucky woman. A man like Temba doesn't come twice." And every time she heard it, she'd smile politely, even though deep down she wondered, was it luck or loyalty that kept her going? Temba would often say, "One day, I'll make it big, and you'll never regret supporting me." Those words kept her heart warm on the hard days. They gave her hope that their love had meaning, that their sacrifices were leading somewhere. But as time passed, something began to shift. Temba's success grew, but his gratitude faded. He stopped saying thank you. He stopped asking for her advice. And slowly, Zuri realized the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the person you build your dreams with is only building theirs. She didn't know it yet, but the same love that once lifted him up would soon tear her world apart. Because luck doesn't last forever, especially when lies start driving. At first, Zuri didn't notice anything unusual. Temba had been busier lately, working late, taking calls outside, saying he was meeting clients after hours. She told herself that's what success looked like: long nights, business dinners, stress. But then the little things started to feel different. He began locking his phone, something he'd never done before. Whenever it buzzed, he'd grab it fast, his voice dropping to a whisper. Sometimes she'd wake up at midnight and find him scrolling, smiling at the screen in the dark. When she asked, "Who are you texting this late?" he'd chuckle and say, "Work stuff, babe. You overthink everything." Zuri tried to believe him. She really did. After all, she'd spent years building that trust. It wasn't something she could just throw away over a few late nights. But deep down, a quiet unease started to grow. The man who once told her everything now felt like a stranger sharing her bed. One Saturday morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table, about to pay the rent. She logged into her bank account, humming softly, and then froze. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense. Her balance looked wrong. She blinked, refreshed the page, and her heart began to race. 12 million Nigerian nairas was gone. She stared at the transaction line, reading it over and over as if her eyes were lying to her. The money she had spent years saving, her emergency fund, her security, her peace, had vanished overnight. And right next to the withdrawal was the name, Auto Empire Motors. Her hands began to shake. Auto Empire. She didn't even own a car. What kind of transfer was this? Why hadn't Temba told her? A wave of cold ran through her body as realization crept in. Temba had access to her account. He always had. Zuri called him immediately, her voice trembling. "Temba, did you move money from my account?" He laughed, calm as ever. "You and your worries. Don't stress yourself, Zuri. It's just business." "Business?" she whispered. "With my life savings." But he ended the call before she could ask more. Zuri sat in silence, her laptop screen still glowing. The house around her suddenly felt too quiet, too heavy. She thought about the late nights, the hidden smiles, the new cologne he wore, and the pieces began to fit together in the most painful way. That day, for the first time in her marriage, Zuri didn't feel like a wife. She felt like a fool. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, whispering to herself, "Temba, what have you done?" She didn't know where to go, what to think, but one thing was certain. The truth was waiting for her, and it was uglier than she could imagine. Zuri barely slept that night. Her mind kept replaying the number, 12 million Nigerian nairas, over and over like a cruel echo. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the words, Auto Empire Motors. By morning, her hands were trembling, but her heart had made a decision. She needed to see it with her own eyes. She dressed quietly, her body moving on autopilot, a loose blouse, jeans, and her old sandals. She didn't bother with makeup. Her reflection in the mirror looked tired but determined, a woman who'd had enough of being lied to. As she drove through Lusaka's busy streets, her stomach churned. Her thoughts were loud. What if it's nothing? What if I'm wrong? But deep down she already knew she wasn't. She could feel the truth coming, heavy and sharp, waiting to pierce what was left of her heart. When she reached Auto Empire Motors, she parked across the street. The place gleamed, rows of shiny cars, men in suits, glass doors reflecting the sunlight. She sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. Then she saw him. Mba. He was standing outside, laughing, looking proud. And beside him was a young woman in a bright red dress. Tall, beautiful, carefree. Zuri watched in disbelief as Temba handed her a set of car keys, grinning like a man in love. The woman squealed, hugging him tight. Then, without hesitation, she kissed his cheek and said, "Thanks, baby." The world around Zuri went silent. Her heart stopped. She felt as if the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Her husband, the man she'd trusted with her soul, had used her money to buy another woman a car. A brand new silver BMW, sparkling in the sun like a trophy. Zuri's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to look away. She wanted this moment to burn into her memory, the moment her love story finally showed its truth. She stepped out of her car, legs shaking, and began walking toward them. The gravel crunched under her feet. One of the salesmen noticed her and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, madam. You must be Mr. Temba's wife." Zuri paused, her eyes locked on Temba's shocked face. For a long second no words came out. Then, with a quiet voice that carried more strength than anger, she said, "Not for long." And with that, she turned around, leaving him frozen in the middle of his perfect lie. The sound of her footsteps echoed behind her, slow, steady, and final. Inside her chest, something cracked wide open. But beneath the pain, something else began to stir. Not revenge, not hate, but power. The kind that comes when a woman finally realizes she deserves better. That night, the house felt colder than usual. Zuri sat on the edge of the bed, the lights off, waiting. Every tick of the clock sounded louder, heavier. She didn't know whether she wanted him to walk through the door or disappear forever. Her heart still hoped for an explanation, some small chance that what she saw was wrong, but her mind already knew the truth. When the front door finally opened, Temba came in whistling, cheerful, humming a song she didn't recognize. He smelled of a strong cologne, one he never wore around her. Too bold, too expensive, too new. He tossed his keys on the table and walked into the room, smiling. "Hey babe, you're still up." Zuri looked at him quietly. "Where were you?" she asked softly. He shrugged, loosening his tie. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." She kept her eyes on him, her voice calm but trembling. "Work at Auto Empire Motors." The smile froze on his face. For a moment he tried to play dumb, but her stare didn't waver. "Zuri, what's this about?" She stood up slowly, her hands clenched. "Don't insult me, Temba. Saw you. You used my savings, 12 million naira, to buy your mistress a car." Her voice cracked at the end, not from anger, but from heartbreak. He sighed and rolled his eyes like she was being dramatic. "Zuri, don't start. You're always emotional about money. That's not your money, that's our money. And I can spend it how I see fit." Her heart dropped. "Our money," she whispered. "The money I saved for years. The money I built while you were still trying to find yourself." He gave a small, careless laugh. "You wouldn't even have that job if it weren't for me. I made you confident. I built this life. Stop acting like you're the victim." Zuri stood there, frozen, staring at the man she thought she knew. All those years of love, all the nights she stayed up helping him chase his dreams, and this was what it came to. He didn't see her as a partner. He saw her as a wallet. Something inside her broke quietly, like glass cracking under pressure. No shouting, no throwing things, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when love finally dies. She turned away, her face calm now, her tears gone. "You built your life, Temba," she said softly. "But you built it on me." He didn't reply. He just scoffed and walked past her, muttering, "You'll come around. You always do. But not this time." That night, Zuri pulled out her suitcase. She folded her clothes neatly, wiped her tears, and placed her wedding ring on the table beside his watch. Then, without a word, she walked out of the house, the same house she had helped pay for, and didn't look back. The air outside was cool and quiet. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of freedom pressing against her chest. "Painful, yes, but clean," she whispered to herself. "Never again," and disappeared into the night, ready to start over from the ashes of everything she'd built for love. The first few weeks after Zuri left were a blur of tears, silence, and sleepless nights. She moved into her cousin Letha's small apartment on the edge of Lusaka, a cozy 2-bedroom flat filled with laughter, old furniture, and the smell of fried plantain. Letha tried her best to comfort her, but nothing seemed to work. Zuri barely spoke. Some nights she just sat by the window, staring at the city lights, wondering how her life had fallen apart so fast. She had given Temba everything, her time, her trust, her money, and he had turned it all into a weapon. The betrayal cut deep, not because she lost her savings, but because she had lost herself somewhere along the way. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, she began to pick herself up. She started jogging again, cooking her favorite meals and helping Letha with bills. But the pain still lingered like a quiet shadow in her heart. Then one morning, while scrolling through her tablet, something caught her eye, a small online ad that read, "Maquina Motors seeks new private investor." Her heart skipped a beat. Maquina Motors, the same company where Temba had built his career. The same company she had helped him get into with her money, her effort, her faith. She stared at the ad for a long time, her hands trembling slightly. Then something inside her, something fierce and alive, woke up. Maybe this was her moment. Maybe this was her chance to take back control. That afternoon, she called an old contact, Mr. Baiko, her former mentor. Years ago, he had been the first person to see her potential when she was just an intern crunching numbers. He used to say, "Zuri, you have a mind sharper than most men in this business. Never waste it." When he answered the call, his warm, deep voice brought her comfort. "Zuri Mwale. It's been ages. How are you, my girl?" She smiled faintly. "Trying to start again," she said. They met the next day at a quiet cafe near the business district. Zuri told him everything, not just about the betrayal, but about her dream to finally own something of her own. Mr. Baiko listened carefully, his eyes soft with pride. Then he said, "You know, investors like you are rare, smart, strategic, and brave. If you're ready, we can make this happen. Let's buy it together." Zuri hesitated, her mind flashing back to all the times she'd stood behind a man's dream. But this time it was different. This time she wasn't helping someone else win. She was claiming her own victory. When she signed the documents a week later, her hands were steady. The title on the paper read, "Zuri Mwale, Majority Shareholder." She stared at it for a long time, a slow smile spreading across her face. She had walked away from her marriage with nothing, but now she was walking back into her power with everything that mattered. And this time she wasn't the woman behind the desk. She was the woman who owned it. Weeks later, life had taken on a completely different rhythm for Zuri. Gone were the sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows. Now her days were filled with meetings, business calls, and quiet confidence. She had invested wisely, learned fast, and impressed everyone at Maquina Motors' boardroom. Yet she kept one thing a secret, her identity as the majority shareholder. Across town, Temba was living a very different story. He bragged to everyone who would listen that he was on his way up. He told his friends at the bar how the management trusted him, how his hard work was finally paying off, and how he might soon get a major promotion. He even laughed about how his wife couldn't handle a real man's ambition. If only he knew. One bright Monday morning, Maquina Motors scheduled an important board meeting. Every senior staff member was invited, including Temba. He arrived early, dressed in his best suit, strutting through the halls like he owned the place. He had no idea that the real owner was someone he used to call "my woman." As he entered the boardroom, he noticed an unfamiliar tension in the air. The company's CEO, Mr. Bonda, was smiling unusually wide. A group of executives were whispering among themselves. Temba straightened his tie and took a seat near the front, his confidence radiating. Then the doors opened. Everyone stood as a new investor walked in, elegant, calm, and radiant. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor. And when Temba looked up, his smile froze. She was dressed in a sleek navy blue suit, her natural hair tied back, her eyes fierce but unreadable. For a moment, Temba thought he was hallucinating. His mouth fell open slightly, but no words came out. Mr. Bonda cleared his throat and began the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of welcoming our new majority investor, the one who made this expansion possible. Please meet Mrs. Zuri Mwale. A stunned silence filled the room. Every eye turned to her. Zuri gave a polite smile and nodded, her voice calm and steady. It's a pleasure to be part of this new chapter for Maquina Motors. Temba could feel his pulse racing. His throat went dry. He could barely breathe as reality hit him. She wasn't here to visit. She wasn't here to forgive. She was here because she owned what he thought belonged to him. When the meeting began, Zuri sat at the head of the table, speaking with clarity and authority. Every time she mentioned numbers or strategy, the executives nodded in respect. Temba sat there quietly, pretending to take notes, his mind spinning. He couldn't even look her in the eye. Zuri didn't need revenge. The room itself was her statement. The woman he once called weak now held the power he could only dream of. As the meeting ended, Temba's legs felt like they might give out. He avoided her gaze, but she looked straight at him, calm, unbothered, untouchable. And in that moment he finally understood what real power looked like. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream or threaten. It simply sat at the head of the table, wearing the name he once took for granted. After the meeting ended, the room buzzed with quiet whispers and admiration for Zuri's composure. She shook hands with the executives, discussing figures and new plans for the company as if she had always belonged there. Meanwhile, Temba sat frozen in his chair, sweat forming at the back of his neck. His mind was a storm, shock, anger, and shame swirling together until he could barely think straight. As people started leaving, he waited for his chance. When Zuri stepped out into the hallway, he quickly followed, his steps heavy and uneven. "Zuri!" he called out, his voice half whisper, half growl. She turned slowly, her expression calm, unreadable. He moved closer, his tone sharp. "You planned this, didn't you? You wanted to embarrass me in front of everyone." Zuri looked at him for a moment, really looked at him, and for the first time she didn't feel pain, just clarity. "No, Temba," she said softly. "I didn't plan to embarrass you. I just reclaimed what you thought you could waste." Her words hit him like a slap, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was more powerful than anger could ever be. He scoffed, trying to save face. "So now what? You think you're better than me because you've got a little money?" Zuri smiled faintly, tilting her head. "No, Temba. I was always better. Not because of money, but because I never needed to destroy someone to feel strong." Before he could respond, the HR manager, Ms. Kunda, approached with a polite smile. "Mr. Mwale, may I have a word in my office?" He frowned but followed, still trying to process everything. Inside the HR office, Ms. Kunda handed him an envelope. Her tone was professional but distant. "The board has decided to restructure several departments," she said. "Your role is being reassigned. You'll be reporting directly to the new head of sales, effective immediately." Temba blinked, confused. "Reassigned? What do you mean?" She adjusted her glasses. "Your new title will be sales associate." For a moment, he just stared at her. "Sales associate," he repeated, his voice cracking. "That's a demotion. I've been in management for years." Ms. Kunda kept her expression neutral. "This decision was made by the board, Mr. Mwale. I'm just communicating it." When he left the office, he felt dizzy. Everything he had bragged about, his title, his influence, his pride, was gone. And the final twist came when he saw the email on his screen introducing his new supervisor, Mrs. Miriam Dubé, a woman he used to mock in front of others, calling her too emotional for leadership. Now she was his boss. As Temba sat at his new desk in the open sales floor, typing reports under fluorescent lights, he could see Zuri's name on the top floor's glass door. Majority shareholder, Mrs. Zuri Mwale. Every time he looked up, he was forced to face the truth. The woman he once dismissed as too quiet had built an empire from the same foundation he tried to break. And while he drowned in humiliation, Zuri rose higher, not fueled by revenge, but by the peace that comes from knowing she didn't have to destroy him. Life had already done it for her. Temba's downfall didn't stop at the office. It followed him everywhere. The man who once strutted through Lusaka with pride now came home late and bitter, drowning his shame in cheap whiskey. But while he tried to piece together what was left of his pride, the woman he'd risked everything for, Tasha, was busy showing off their perfect life online. Tasha had built a small following on social media by bragging about her rich man. Her posts were full of captions like, "When he loves you right, he spoils you big," and photos of her leaning against the shiny silver BMW, the same one bought with Zuri's stolen savings. She flaunted designer bags, expensive dinners, and weekend trips, always tagging the location but never the man. Still, everyone knew. For a while people envied her. But fame built on lies never lasts. One quiet Tuesday morning, while Tasha filmed herself in the car for another video, two men in suits arrived at her gate. They introduced themselves politely and handed her a document stamped with the Maquina Motors logo. "Ma'am," one of them said, "this vehicle was purchased under fraudulent circumstances. It's being repossessed as company property." Her face went pale. "What do you mean fraudulent? My boyfriend bought this car for me." The men didn't argue. They simply pointed to the paperwork showing the car's registration and the company's ownership. Within minutes, they drove the BMW away as neighbors peeked through their windows. By evening, Tasha's phone was full of messages, not from admirers but from gossip pages. Her followers started unfollowing, mocking her in comments. Screenshots of her bragging posts circulated with laughing emojis. Her rich life had crumbled in one day. Meanwhile, at Maquina Motors, Zuri received the final report confirming the repossession. She signed it calmly, not out of revenge but to close the last chapter of a painful story. Justice didn't need shouting, it only needed truth. That night, Temba showed up at her office unannounced. He looked exhausted, eyes sunken, shirt wrinkled, pride gone. "Zuri," he said quietly, almost whispering, "please. I made a mistake. I was stupid. I lost everything. You were right about everything." She looked at him, her expression soft but steady. "What do you want, Temba?" He took a shaky breath. "Another chance. Change. I'll fix things. Just come home." Zuri let out a slow sigh, standing from her chair. She walked over to the window, looking out at the city, the same city where she'd once driven through tears, feeling broken. Now it sparkled before her. She turned to him and said gently, "Temba, I already gave you my chance." He looked at her confused. "What does that mean?" Her voice didn't tremble. "You spent it." He stood there frozen, the weight of her words settling in. There was no anger in her tone, only finality. As he left her office, shoulders slumped, Zuri sat back down and smiled faintly. The woman who once cried over betrayal now ruled over the empire built on her pain. And for the first time she didn't look back. After everything that happened, Zuri didn't waste time celebrating revenge. She got to work. She wanted to rebuild Maquina Motors, not just as a business but as a story of purpose. The first thing she did was change everything that represented the old ways. The logo, the motto, the management, all of it. The new slogan read, "Driven by integrity, powered by women." People laughed at first. Some whispered that a woman running a car company would never last. Others doubted her new, women-led direction. But Zuri didn't care. She knew what she was doing. She hired female engineers, accountants, and sales managers who had been overlooked for years. She created fair pay policies and mentorship programs for young women who wanted to enter the auto industry. Every Monday morning, she gathered her team in the showroom, the same one where she once stood humiliated, and reminded them, "We don't sell cars. We sell belief. Belief that women can drive their own future." Within months, something incredible happened. The company's reputation began to shift. Customers started choosing Maquina Motors not just for cars, but for what it represented: honesty, innovation, and empowerment. Zuri introduced affordable car plans for single mothers and safe driving campaigns for young women. Her commercials didn't feature flashy men in suits. They showed confident African women behind the wheel, smiling, independent, unstoppable. Sales skyrocketed. Profits tripled in just 6 months. And soon, Maquina Motors was being featured in every major magazine across Africa. One headline read, "The woman who drove her own destiny." Another said, "From betrayal to boardroom power, Zuri Maquina's unshakable rise." She became a symbol, not of revenge but of rebirth. Women from all over began sending her letters and messages, sharing how her story gave them courage to leave toxic relationships, start businesses, and stand up for themselves. At an industry gala, a reporter asked her, "Zuri, what's the secret behind your success?" She smiled softly and said, "I stopped letting pain drive me. I took the wheel myself." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. But for Zuri, it wasn't about fame, it was about freedom. Her quiet revenge had turned into a movement. She had gone from a woman whose husband used her savings for his mistress to a CEO who inspired thousands of African women to reclaim their power. And every time she walked into her office, she carried one thought in her heart. They tried to silence her, but she built an empire instead. A year later, Zuri stood on a shining stage at one of Africa's biggest business summits. The hall was packed, cameras flashing, people whispering her name with respect. The same woman who once cried over her stolen savings now stood tall in an elegant white suit, her confidence glowing brighter than the lights around her. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the microphone. Her voice was calm but powerful, echoing through the silent room. "He used my savings to buy a car," she said, pausing for a moment as the crowd listened closely. "But I used my pain to buy an empire." The audience erupted in cheers and applause. Some people stood, others clapped through tears, because they knew her story. They knew what it meant to fall, to break, and to rise again stronger than before. Zuri smiled, but her eyes were soft. She didn't feel pride, she felt peace. She thanked her team, her mentor Mr. Baiko, and every woman who refused to let betrayal define her. Then she walked off the stage, her heels clicking with quiet power. As she passed the glass wall outside the hall, her reflection caught her eye. For a moment, she stopped and looked at herself, not the broken woman she once was, but the strong, graceful leader she had become. Her reflection smiled back, because she finally understood. Revenge was never the goal. Growth was. Healing was. Evolution was. Some women don't fight to destroy what hurt them. They rise to build something better. And Zuri Mwail had done exactly that. She didn't just take her power back, she turned it into her legacy.